Welcome to TRT World and beautiful Slovenia. I am Semir Sejfovic, and in this week's Across the Balkans, we bring you the latest stories from the region and how countries, governments, and the population are affected. Nationalism may feel like a thing of the past in the Balkans, yet old tensions are resurfacing. Adam Amunu takes a closer look at how these forces are shaping politics across the region.
The breakup of the former Yugoslavia and the subsequent Balkan Wars may feel like a distant memory, but the nationalism that underscored them still echoes within the region. The resurgence of nationalism in parts of the Balkans has prompted concerns and raised questions about its legacy in politics and the wider society. Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik of Republika Srpska was recently spared prison in favour of a fine and was removed from office by electoral authorities. This follows his conviction for flouting the country's High Representative Christian Schmidt. Dodik has often opposed the country's institutions and warned that the entity would secede. Doing so could jeopardise the Dayton Peace Accords that ended the Bosnian War almost 30 years ago. Dodik also said that he expects full support from Serbia, whose President Aleksandar Vučić is the key ally. Dodik has previously stated that he wants the right for Republika Srpska to join Serbia, which may be inspired by the concept known as Serbian World. The political idea of the Serbian World was first widely used by Aleksandar Vulin, a close ally and political partner of Vučić. Some analysts say the idea of the Serbian World is to create a political entity of states that are politically and culturally loyal, primarily to Vučić and his regime in Serbia, disregarding the national borders and states they reside in. In Serbia, nationalism has also been a key driving force behind Vučić's regional policies. Serbia is embroiled in a long-drawn territorial dispute with Kosovo, an ethnic Albanian majority country which declared independence from Serbia in 2008. The Serbian government doesn't recognise Kosovo's sovereignty and has no formal control there. Romania and Bulgaria have not experienced the same level of nationalism, but the Nationalist Alliance for the Union of Romanians emerged in 2020. It gained prominence during the recent presidential race, where its leader, George Simion, reached the final round but narrowly lost. Meanwhile, in Bulgaria, the decision to phase in the euro currency by 2026 has ignited division on what this move means for Bulgarian identity. President Rumen Radev has vocally supported protesters who oppose abandoning the lev, Bulgaria's national currency, which they believe represents Bulgaria's identity. Analysts say a resurgence of nationalism in the region is partly fueled by foreign influence, with Russia seen as an important benefactor of leaders who challenge the West's prominence on the international stage. The rise of nationalism across the Balkans shows that old tensions remain unresolved. As leaders and movements push for identity and influence, the region faces a delicate balancing act between sovereignty, unity, and external pressures. Adam Amunu, Across the Balkans.
To better understand the political turmoil in the region, we speak to Dr. Faris Kočan in Maribor, Slovenia, a political scientist and expert on EU-Western Balkans relations. Dr. Kočan, thank you very much for talking to TRT World and Across the Balkans. We're seeing tensions continuously rise in the Balkans when it comes to nationalism, the EU path, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Montenegro, problems between Serbia and Bosnia's internal affairs when it comes to the Serb representative Milorad Dodik. How do you see the rise of nationalism extend in the future in the Balkans?
The rise of nationalism in the Balkans, or the fall of the nationalism in the Balkans, is closely connected to the notions of the nation and state buildings in the broader Western Balkans area. So nationalism can be an essential component or productive component when you have to build a state or nation or state subsystems, but it can be counterproductive when you have the state, when you have the subnational systems, when you need to govern. So the political elites in the Western Balkans are on one hand trying to still build states, build nations, and on the other hand they have to govern the complicated relations between the European Union and other external factors and actors that are shaping the domestic trajectories of the Western Balkans. So I would say that they are lazy because they understand and they know that nationalism can be instrumentalized very cheaply to achieve political goals. And in that respect, you see that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Montenegro, and in other Western Balkan countries. So why do they do it? Because politics is battle for the, authority, battle for the seats, battle for, for the position. So I would say that nationalism is here to stay. I don't believe that the younger generations are going to be much more different than the older generations when it comes to using and abusing the nationalism, because they are socialized in, this landscape, in this broader community, where nationalism is still seen as productive because you protect something. You protect your own identity, you protect your own political entity, just because, somebody is going to take away something from you. And that, within the broader context of the European Union, the NATO, and to global affairs, nationalism is also productive, to keep hold ground for their own seats. They just care to stay on position, to maintain the status quo, and not change anything when it comes to reform. So nationalism here is productive because people do believe that they are threatened, that their identity is threatened, that their political entities is threatened, and that the political elites that are there keep to maintain this, security in identity terms, in political entity terms. So I would say that,
We are seeing that Serbia is again a very relevant factor in the Balkans, especially with the nations that it has borders with. Serbia's interference in Bosnia and Herzegovina, its influence there. In Montenegro, the rising influence of the Serbian Orthodox Church, particularly in Montenegro. We're also seeing an extended hand of politics in northern Macedonia. Is Serbia a stable country or a country relevant to the security of the Balkans?
as long as Serbia is stable, as long as Serbia is content, the Western Balkan region is content. And of course, Serbia, due to its being the most, the biggest country, the most, prominent in this respect, having the most ties, both Western and Eastern, is perceived as a factor of stability and instability in the Western Balkans. So when it comes first to the Bosnia and Herzegovina, you have entity, one of the two semi-autonomous entities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, namely the Republika Srpska. So where the official Belgrade is actually dictating the tempo of it, they are part and parcel of their own, I would say projected social and material world. When it comes to Montenegro, now Montenegro is becoming a battlefield for Serbian political thought. Montenegro was the last one to actually, if not mentioning the Kosovo, to have its own independence from Serbia in 2005. So when it comes to Montenegro, it is now becoming a battlefront due to the internal political debates when it comes to the pro-Serbian and pro-Russian political leads, leading by Mandic, who is, of course, one of the most prominent politicians in Montenegro. So here you see that they're opening a new horizon, mostly also because they have to cut ties with Milorad Dodik, because he is becoming an enfant terrible for the West, for the European Union as such. But nonetheless, you can see or sense that they're not so much for the European Union of Montenegro, because, Serbia is more or less surrounded by NATO states, and in the future, more or less, it's going to be surrounded by states that are strongly part of the Euro-Atlantic framework. Bosnia and Herzegovina received the green light from the European Commission, even though they didn't deserve it. So the politicians actually did 1 out of 14, priorities that were listed by the European Commission from 2019, but they were given the green light because of the war. And they are here now because of this, security paradigm, security threat that the Bosnia and Herzegovina is for Montenegro is becoming vis-a-vis, the broader tendencies of Russia, China, and other actors for the Western Balkans. So I would say that Serbia is still going to stay the most important factor, but we'll have to see what will come out of this, broader protest against Aleksandar Vučić. He's, the strong man of Serbia, but he's now also losing his grip in the public opinion polls. Student movements, if they're going to transform this into a political party, they can actually challenge for the first time Aleksandar Vučić. So Aleksandar Vučić needs to have a clear balance between the internal dynamics and the support from the international community and the European Union, because this is the most important thing. This is something that Slobodan Milošević didn't have, and this is why Slobodan Milošević failed. And Vučić knows that because he was part and parcel of that government, and he understands that the most important factor is the external one. So he is trying to be delicate, and that's why he will not engage so much into the Dodik politics. If he survives, okay, but if not, that's not my problem. As people say, not my monkeys, not my circus.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kočan, for the interview. And it was amazing to be here with you in Maribor.
Thank you for inviting me.
Nationalism is reshaping Balkan politics and testing post-war institutions. A Bosnian court ruling has ignited a cross-border clash over legitimacy. In Serbia, leaders, they say, defend peace and the Dayton Peace Agreement. Critics warn the rhetoric could erode on both sides. Katarina Petrovic has more from Belgrade.
A court ruling in Sarajevo has become a regional stress test. Republika Srpska President Milorad Dodik won't go to prison. The court converted his one-year sentence into a fine of approximately $22,000, but a 6-year ban from office still stands. Bosnia's election authority has moved to revoke his mandate. Belgrade rejects the ruling's legitimacy.
Republika Srbija ne prihvata i najoštrije osuđuje odluku suda Bosne i Hercegovine, jer je ta i takva odluka zasnovana na političkom krivičnom delu, nepoštovanju odluka nelegalnog i nelegitimnog predstavnika međunarodne zajednice Kristijana Šmita, što je ravno verbalnom deliktu. Ta odluka predstavlja udar na celokupni srpski narod u Bosni i Hercegovini, kao i udar na ustavni poredak te države koji je zasnovan na Dejtonskom mirovnom sporazumu.
Serbia's government sees the ruling as a threat to security while urging calm.
Naša politika spram Bosne i Hercegovine ostaje zasnovana na čvrstim i jasnim principima, među kojima su najvažniji svakako puno poštovanje teritorijalnog integriteta Bosne i Hercegovine, kao i teritorijalnog integriteta i nadležnosti Republike Srpske, protivljenje unitarizacije Bosne i Hercegovine.
The story is no longer about a sentence, it's about the system. A ban, a referendum threat, and Serbia's backing for Republika Srpska are testing the Dayton Order and Belgrade's EU path at the same time. Every step from here carries a cost. From Banja Luka, Dodik answers with defiance and rejecting Sarajevo's authority.
Mandat mi je dao narod, zato ćemo ga poslušati na referendumu o meni i funkciji koju obavljam, koja će se, vjerujem kako smo dogovorili, na bazi odluke Skupštine održati u narednom periodu. Zna se da Republika Srpska ne kleči. Ja niti ću klečati, niti ću puzati, ali ću se boriti. I mislim da će on imati problem s tom borbom.
He also signals where he'll seek support.
Očekujem potpunu podršku Srbije, obraću se za podršku Rusiji, objasnit ću i napisat ćemo pisma Željka i ostali odgovorni i novoj američkoj administraciji.
Bosnia's election commission says removing a mandate after a final conviction is automatic, by law, not by political choice. One critic argues that defending Dodik means supporting a constant crisis, and that it could ultimately harm Republika Srpska and isolate Serbia.
Milorad Dodik se uvek prilagođava politici Srbije i ako pratimo istorijat njegovog dolaska uopšte na vlast, Početkom 2000-ih, bez ikakve skupštinske većine, doveden je Milorad Dodik.
He warns the current narrative could backfire on the very structure that holds Bosnia together.
To je takođe danas opisano kao napad na Srbe, napad na Republiku Srpsku i ono što je najgore od svega, to je siguran put ka nestanku Republike Srpske, jer je nemoguće je da opstane Republika Srpska van Bosne i Hercegovine. U Dejtonu 1995. nisu potpisali mir Karadžić kao predstavnik Republike Srpske i Alija Izetbegović. Mir su potpisali Slobodan Milošević u ime Srbije, Tuđman u ime Hrvatske i Alija Izetbegović u ime BiH.
The domestic cost, he says, could be diplomatic isolation.
Dodik je bukvalno eksponent beogradske politike i onako kako beogradska politika diriguje, tako on igra i tako je 25 godina. I ukoliko se ne desi da Srbija i srpska politika na iole normalan i pravi način odreaguje na presudu koja je Dodika osudila na godinu dana zatvora i 6 godina zabrane bavljenja politikom, ulazimo zaista u ozbiljan rizik da će Srbija postati taoc Milorada Dodika, da će očigledno onda pružiti sigurnu kuću beguncu i odbegloj osobi od krivične presude. To je nešto što zaista Srbiji nije potrebno, jer dovoljno je da budemo izolovani od regiona i susednih država, a svakako ćemo biti dodatno izolovani od Evropske unije.
Political analyst Dušan Janjić says the legal path is clear. The decision must be enforced. Armed conflict is unlikely, but political instability will follow.
Pa Republika Srpska nema nikakvu mogućnost da ne izvrši odluku, niti Dodik ima, niti za to postoji podrška u parlamentu, ne samo od opozicije. Dodik ne može biti predsjednik Republike Srpske 6 godina. To znači da se ne može baviti ni javnim političkim poslom.
He points to the international backstop and to a public that's less receptive to zero-sum nationalism.
Ako bude neophodno, međunarodna zajednica ima na raspolaganju EUFOR i ostalo, radi se o urgentnoj potrebi razoružavanja paravojske i policije koja deluje u Srbiji i zaustaje njihovo kretanje i to time znači da Mile Dodik se pomiri sa svojom sudbinom iz 90-ih, iz stradanja, genocida, ratova i međunarodne izolacije. Svi su naučili neke lekcije. Ovo što je Dodik pokušao da odigra svoju posljednju odbranu, ta priča o svesrpskom svetu, svi Srbi zajedno, to ne deluje ubedljivo javnosti ni Srbije.
Janjić says there's a broader shift away from crisis politics and towards the rule of law.
Mi pristujemo zapravo socijalnom buntu protiv jedne vlasti koje Mile Dodik pripada. To je ta vlast političari koji su u službi drugih.
Avoiding jail hasn't ended the crisis, it's shifted it. With a ban in place, a threatened referendum in Republika Srpska, and Serbia under pressure to choose its path, the next moves will reveal whether the region steps back from escalation or drifts towards it. Katarina Petrović, Across the Balkans, Belgrade.
Nationalism is rising in Montenegro and across the Balkans, especially among youth. Political tensions, historic grievances, and the influence of religious and political leaders are reshaping the region's social and political fabric, reviving concerns about its future. Mirjana Miladinovic reports from Podberg.
She's 24, studies abroad, and dreams of returning home to help shape a more tolerant and open-minded generation. But Sofia Kirsanov says it's impossible to ignore what she sees when she returns to Montenegro. A growing wave of nationalism among young people.
Bilo da su to mladi ljudi koji su u političkim partijama i vrlo glasno izražavaju svoje nacionalističke stavove kako bi ili dobili političke poene ili prosto iz dubokog uvjerenja. Onda imamo mlade ljude u različitim ekstremističkim grupacijama, bilo da su to navijačke grupacije ili vezane čak i za neke vjerske institucije. U jednom širem smislu, tako da definitivno možemo okarakterisati stanje kao zabrinjavajuće postoje mladi ljudi koji su mnogo više globalistički orijentisani i ne postoji uopšte kod njih ta nota nacionalizma, ali kada pogledamo ovako cijelo društvo, zaista mislim da imamo slobodu da damo tu zabrinjavajuću ocjenu.
Analysts say this increase is a part of a wider regional trend, fueled by political rhetoric, history, and the influence of neighboring Serbia.
Dakle, to je nezadovoljstvo zvanične politike dominantne u Beogradu, koja je izgubila teritorije, uticaj i ratove i dolaskom Vučića na vlast pokušava, dakle, režim i duboka država koja je prisutna sve vreme od 87. godine do današnjih dana, pokušava da uz rusku podršku na neki način akumulira novu snagu i da preko politike srpskog sveta povrati taj velikosrpski uticaj.
That dissatisfaction, he says, has evolved into a clear political strategy.
U najkraćem bih objasnio, pored toga što je Srbija nezadovoljna, dakle, rezultatima 90-ih, ona sa druge strane ima novo rešenje, to je bosnizacija Crne Gore. Zašto je to pogubno? Zato što Evropa i evropske demokratije ne poznaju uređenja kakvo je u Bosni i Hercegovini. Dakle, to nije evropska građanska demokratija u kojoj svako ima pravo da bira i bude biran. Dakle, tamo morate da se izjasnite kao pripadnik jedan od tri naroda da biste bili izabrani.
But some say there is an even deeper paradox, one that sets Montenegro apart from the rest of Europe. And on nationalism scale, if there is one, they would give a high grade.
It's kind of paradox that generations of our parents or grandparents are more progressive than my generation or generations younger than me. That's kind of one paradox that you will not find in any other country in Europe, maybe not even in the region. So I will not opt for 10, but I will say 9. We are streaming towards very dangerous path where you cannot resume, you cannot undo changes that are done to the collective identity.
For young people in Montenegro, experts say nationalism is often more of a consequence than a cause, the product of their upbringing, political narratives, and especially the education system.
Mi znamo da u našem obrazovnom sistemu građansko obrazovanje stoji nekako na posljednjem mjestu, da pored fenomenalnih kurikuluma koji su predloženi od strane civilnog sektora, koji uključuju zapravo teme koje se tiču pomirenja sa prošlošću i upravo ovih tema o kojima smo upravo govorili, gdje bi mladi imali jednu solidarnu viziju društva i gdje bi na prošlost gledali ne nešto što nas dijeli, već nešto što nas ujedinjava. Sve to zapravo nikada nije došlo na sto.
She says the problem is amplified by online spaces where hate speech goes unchecked.
Jačanje desnice možemo u velikoj mjeri pripisati tome i mislim da naš region neće biti veliki izuzetak. Veliki problem je što, na primjer, konkretno u Crnoj Gori Digital Service Act nije još usvojen, tako da mi nekako imamo taj divlji zapad na internetu gdje svako ima prostor da upravo ovu zapaljivu retoriku širi i da nekako mržnju plasira kao svoj sadržaj i da država je praktično nemoćna pred takvom vrstom sadržaja.
And for her, much of the blame lies with the political class.
Politika i jeste kriva jer politika, nažalost, oblikuje našu zbilju. Vidimo da je uspjela da se nekako uvuče u sve grane našeg života, bilo da je to obrazovanje, kultura, mediji i definitivno možemo u njoj tražiti uzrok većine problema.
That political influence, warns Kalezic, is especially dangerous in a region that still remembers the wars of the 90s.
Balkans still has a fresh memory on the war that was predominantly driven by ethno-nationalism. So this is why it's more dangerous here to see that trend comparing to any other place, at least in Europe. This is why I'm worried. This is why I want to raise awareness on that topic.
Nationalism among youth in Montenegro is no longer a relic of the past. It's becoming part of the mainstream, shaped by regional politics, social media, and weakened institutions. Young people are turning to strong identities in search of clarity and belonging. But is this a passing trend or the start of something deeper?
Some fear this could have serious consequences, not only for Montenegro but for the wider Balkans, a region long known as Europe's powder keg.
Ja mislim da sveukupna politička situacija, političari, politički ambijent, društveni problemi, a sa druge strane te socijalne nejednakosti, sve su to u stvari preduslovi da taj nacionalizam kod mladih u stvari nađe dobro tlo za, nažalost, razvoj. Tako da mislim da političari gotovo da nisu ni svjesni uloge koju imaju.
She says these inequalities have historically been the spark for much larger conflicts. Unlike in Western Europe, where far-right movements often focus on immigration, Sofia says nationalism in the Balkans is aimed squarely within its own borders.
Kod nas vidim neku drugu stvar. Mi nemamo tog vanjskog neprijatelja, kako bi se to reklo u političkim naukama, već mrzimo jedni druge, što je najporaznije.
It's one of the reasons she plans to return, determined to work for change from within.
Mislim, vjerujem i nadam se da može biti mnogo bolje uz ipak mnogo truda i mnogo rada, ali taj rad će imati velike, lijepe, pozitivne posljedice i moramo ga uložiti da bi nam bilo bolje.
For Sofia, the challenge is clear. Montenegro's future will depend on whether the next generation chooses to inherit the divisions of the past or build something entirely different. Mirjana Miladinović, Across the Balkans, Podgorica, Montenegro.
Thank you for watching TRT World and letting us once again take you across the Balkans. That is all from the team for this week. We hope to see you next time. Bye-bye from beautiful Slovenia.